there and welcome back to another Daredevil video. And today I'm going to be talking about the latest episode to drop, episode 6, Excessive Force, which picks up the main story again after a bit of a side tangent self-contained story for episode 5. I really enjoyed the self-contained and low-stakes nature of episode 5. It was a nice palate cleanser overall, but at the same time, I'm very excited to get back into the actual swing of the story. We start off the episode with a little bit of a showcase that vigilantism is alive and well in New York, even after the death of White Tiger and the retirement of Daredevil. We see Swordsman, aka Jack Duquesne, whooping some random thugs in the street. Not sure how much mileage that character would have in any sort of main role, but I tell you what, just once, I want him and Daredevil to team up and most importantly, speak to one another. I think it would be a lot of fun to have a very serious and brutal Daredevil team up with a guy who has ultimately been a meme character so far. We then have a brief scene of a mysterious character on the train lines watching as a train goes past him. He's dressed as some sort of technician, but his face is covered. Plus we have a slow zoom, he has his hood up, there's sinister music, so I'm guessing this is actually Muse, and that he has a job that takes him into the train tunnels. Maybe maintenance or something. After this, we have a scene where a random worker stumbles across one of Muse's victims who's been drained of blood and who had their eyes gouged out. Yikes, that escalated quickly? It's legitimately deeply unsettling. Oh yeah, and there's also graffiti mocking Fisk, which was done by Muse. Finally, we get into the crunch time. We then have a double scene intercutting between both Matt and Wilson at the start of their days. We start off with a pretty cool sequence where Matt's sitting on his bed praying, whilst also reflecting over the recent events of his life, most especially his time as Daredevil, and the increasing pull he feels coming back into it. This was actually really interesting to me. It does feel like in a lot of TV shows and films, religion is often put on the back burner. So to see an openly practicing religious person actually does make this stand out quite a bit. Then it's over to Fisk, who's still chafing and having to do so many engagements and functions every single night. So he's in a bit of a mood, only to find Luca in his office. Luca the tracksuit guy, who's the boss of the Irish guys who tried to knock over the bank last episode. The scene cuts back and forth between Matt and Fisk, so we'll just stay on Fisk for a moment. The essence of this scene is that Fisk wants this guy to leave, and to also cough up the money that he owes to the other crime boss, Victor. Plus, now he owes extra for coming in here and acting like Mr. Big Shot. But this guy simply tells him to get stuffed, to stay out of the game, or there'll be consequences. I tell you what, this scene got me good. I really did think it was going to be game over for this guy and that Fisk was just going to snap. And so I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. That being said, there is no chance, absolutely zero chance this guy survives the season. Death flags are all over for him. We know it's building to Kingpin coming back with a vengeance. And so, this guy has to be roadkill. The other half of this scene deals with Matt and Heather in the apartment. As I said before, he starts off his scene praying and breezes past her attempts to talk to him about how he was feeling after being held hostage at the bank, which I kind of think bothered her based on her facial expressions. She then talks about how she's going to be writing a second book, this time about vigilantes, why people revere them, and whether wearing the mask makes you more likely to be your true self, or to give in to your animalistic behavior. Matt says he thinks it's a bit of both, and based on how he behaves when he's Daredevil, yeah, I'd agree with that. Thought it was pretty funny when she asked if he could set up an interview with Punisher though. The idea of Frank talking to a therapist to give her tidbits of a book to get inside the mind of a vigilante, it's just a ridiculous image. Although this would be another excellent post-credit scene kind of thing. Then the intro theme plays and we get down to business. Fisk has a short scene in his office with a very long-winded explanation by a representative of the Department of Sanitation about getting the mural down that was making fun of Fisk. Nothing was working, and so they did a chemical analysis and realized that the mural had been painted using blood. Damn. I wasn't actually expecting this to turn into a three-way dance. I figured Muse would only be a problem for Daredevil, who would come out of retirement and attract Fisk's attention. Now Fisk is getting involved though, so I'm not actually sure where they go from here. Also, this guy's an artist, so I wonder if maybe Vanessa, a noted art enthusiast, might find herself getting in trouble. That could be interesting. On top of that, he's also probably attending therapy with Heather, so it opens up a lot of possible avenues to go. Then it's over to Matt's office, where in the midst of a meeting with Kirsten, Angela, the niece of the late White Tiger, comes in wanting to speak to him. Holy hell, this girl is short. It's not like Charlie Cox is some giant either. So she is just tiny. Anyway, she comes in and the gist of the scene is that she thinks she knows where the serial killer's operating because her uncle's been tracking the disappearances. She wants something done, but she doesn't trust the police, hence why she took it to Matt. And I get that she's mourning her uncle, but even for somebody grappling with grief, what did this kid think the blind lawyer was going to be able to do without police involvement? Go into the lair himself and get murdered? It's not like she even knows he's Daredevil. I'm just not sure what her strategy was. Regardless, it's also wild to me that he lets her leave without contacting her family or even the police with some sort of anonymous tip about what she said. Say she didn't go down there and just gave up. Would he let the bodies keep piling? At that point, it's just selfishness, isn't it? Sure, he doesn't want to be Daredevil, or rather he thinks he can't be, but doing nothing, not even contacting authorities, that's so much worse. Back to Fisk, and he's listening to reports from Gallo and Officer Kim from the hostage episode, as they recount how at least 60 people have been murdered by this guy. How inefficient are the police in this world? Most serial killers that make the news in real life are connected to a lot of victims, sure, but this is next level. Nobody would have noticed at all, it seems, if he hadn't started dumping the bodies in plain view and started making fun of Fisk with his artwork. Hence, I guess, why Fisk laughs and then once again just slaps Gallo down and mocks him for the sanitation department, figuring out there was a serial killer before the NYPD did. Man, I really thought that Gallo was going to be a power player when we first saw him in this show. Even when Fisk was threatening him over a Philly cheesesteak and he was making his threats back, I thought it was going to lead somewhere. In the end, though, this dude's just a schmuck. We followed this up with Muse nabbing 2 more victims. Did feel a little bit forced though. They were in an alleyway, yes, but based on the wider shots, you could see people walking past in the distance. You tell me he was able to kill them both, mutilate them, pose them, and nobody saw anything at all. Nobody heard their very loud screams. I get it, this guy's meant to be skilled, but this took a lot more suspension of disbelief than usual. Over to Fisk again, and here we got a really interesting scene where Fisk has to contend with the people that he has no power against. The New York City elite. So strange to watch him get verbally slapped around and then shit on with no real comeback at all, and to watch Jack Duquesne of all people essentially warn him that if he pisses off the wrong person, they're going to blow up the mayor's residence and kill him. Knowing Fisk, this dynamic's not going to last forever though, is it? Yeah, it's good for the story that he isn't all-powerful straight away, but there's got to be no chance that he doesn't take steps to ensure that he wins at the end and has power over all of them. Hell, maybe he even gets some more traditional Fisk-style revenge against some of the more rude ones. His suit does rip when he goes to get dressed after all. This means he's heading back to the old Fisk. It's only a matter of time before he tenderizes somebody's skull. Hope it's not Jack though, I like Jack. We then have a pretty interesting scene with Cherry where he meets up with Matt to give him all the exposition that we already knew about Muse being a serial killer, having killed upwards of 60 people. Once again, just great acting from Charlie Cox. The look on his face when he hears the number 60, knowing that he could have been out there but wasn't. The way his voice changes, becomes more expressionless. Also, Cherry, you gotta stop riding for the cops, man. Ugh, let them handle it. Really? There's a freak out there draining blood and painting people's pictures with it, and you don't want him taken down ASAP? I get having principles, but when they get in the way of common sense or the greater good, it just makes you seem like a douchebag. Cherry, you're a douchebag. At his billionaire party, Fisk gets word that there's more victims, and so this leads to him calling Gallo into his office the next day and telling him that he's handpicked a task force that's going to be composed of all the dirty cops and overzealous psychos in the NYPD. So these will at first be going after the likes of Muse. But very soon I'm sure we're going to see them pivot and start to go after anybody and everybody. Daredevil and Punisher perhaps, but most especially people that piss off Fisk. As after all, they're not required to wear body cameras. This is pretty much his own little legal private army that allows him to act as a mob boss again whilst technically working within the confines of the system and the law. There was a great speech from Fisk in this scene as well. God, for a character with such a gravelly voice, he gets so many excellent dialogue and monologue sequences in this show. It must grate on that actor's throat though, poor guy. Anyway, it's all starting to heat up now. Speaking of which, we cut over to Angela, who's had the bright idea of heading into the tunnels in search of this serial killer. God, she not watched a horror movie before? This feels like a mistake. And what do you know? It is a mistake. I really like that we got a couple of scenes in episode 4 of this guy doing his thing in the tunnels, and then him murdering those women earlier on in this episode. Because I think it really manages to up the stakes and puts you on edge for this scene. Because you know what these footsteps are and who is lurking in the dark. It's a really great tension builder sequence that ties in so well to the next scene of Matt at home listening to information about the tunnels. Because, of course, he can't resist. That's followed by a call from Angela's aunt, worried about her not coming home. He originally goes into his defense mechanism of just wanting to call the police and backing out, until he decides, nope, enough's enough, and we get that epic suit-up moment of him charging off to save the day. Oh, this was so hype. Then it begins, the huge climactic ending of the episode, the 2 battles. The first is Muse versus Daredevil. Muse carries Angela into his lair and begins the process of draining her blood. The scene is very long, it's drawn out and creepy as all hell. It goes on so long that you're sitting there thinking, oh wow, is Matt going to be too late? Is he going to find her dead and then just snap and kill this guy? Then Muse hears a noise, and after another train passes, you see a tiny figure in the distance running at him full pelt. Oh my god. This fight, it's a little bit more even than Adam versus Fisk, but really it's mostly just Daredevil beating the shit out of Muse. Muse pulls some weapons and gets some hits in, but then he gets cooked again and again, only to escape when Daredevil rightfully prioritizes saving Angela over finishing the fight completely. But yeah, this fight was the shit. I loved it. Great choreography, nice and brutal, and lingered long enough that you wondered, is Angela gonna die? And made you really want to see him put this guy away for good. The part where Matt Sparta kicks him in the chest and then roars, that was probably my highlight, but him hanging Muse was also just so vicious. Just awesome all round. And so you can contrast this with the really intriguing and exciting and yet far less hype fight between Fisk and Adam. Fisk comes down and monologues at this poor bastard. At first I thought when he came in that he was going to use the axe to cut off Adam's hands, because that's what Vanessa had liked about Adam to begin with. Then he tosses him the axe and the fight's on, and Adam is absolutely destroyed. Fisk screams mine at him, and obviously that's about Vanessa, and then he just wrecks him, just destroys this poor bugger. Honestly, it was so vicious to the point that Adam probably should be dead or die off screen between the episodes. His head was smashed so hard into bricks that the bricks broke. Now, I know this is MCU, and in action movies and shows that people just take heaps of punishment, but he has to be dead. I do wonder whether Vanessa's actually going to care about this in the end. I feel like it might be setting up to a reveal where she kind of knows, but has just accepted that this is what's going to happen. I mean, maybe they have her do something, but I'm just not sure. Then Fisk sits there just basking in the light. The return of the Kingpin as the Angel of Vengeance. Whilst Daredevil, he's the hero, and he's the friend and advocate of the poor. Somebody who pursues justice instead of vengeance. Really, this show is just very clever. Sometimes it feels too clever for me. I always feel like I'm trying to catch up with what they're trying to do. Such a great episode. Pushes the story in such an interesting direction. I'm really eager to see what happens next. And so with all that being said, these have been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of this episode? Did you like it? Hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.